The sun was a merciless bronze disk, hammering the life from the red earth of Umuofia village. This was not the gentle life-giving sun of planting season. This was a tyrant, a scorching overlord that had baked the streams to muddy trickles and turned the once fertile fields into cracked, barren plates. It had emptied the village's grain stores as surely as it had drained the people's hope, leaving behind a hollow silence where the laughter of children and the gossip of women once flourished. On the narrow path from the stream, Amara's footsteps were a slow, syncopated drum in the heavy afternoon. The lone calabash of water balanced on her head felt heavier than stone, a precarious vessel holding the essence of their survival. Each careful step sent a slosh of precious liquid, a sound that seemed to mock the vast dryness surrounding her. Her thoughts, like weary birds, circled the dark interior of her family's hut, her mother Neka, whose cough had settled deep within her chest, a rattling, dry sound worse than the rustle of dead leaves. The village healer had come and gone, his herbs offering little comfort, his eyes speaking what his words would not. Sickness fed on hunger, and hunger was their constant, unwelcome guest. Tucked securely in the fold of her faded wrapper was a small pouch. Inside, the last handful of garri, coarse cassava flakes, felt like a secret treasure. It was a meager supper, to be mixed with a little water into a bland, filling paste. It was all that stood between her mother and complete emptiness. Amara's own stomach clenched, a familiar hollow ache, but she ignored it. A daughter's duty was a chain stronger than iron, and her love for Neka was the forge that had made it. As she neared the village crossroads, the ancient iroko tree rose like a gnarled monument. Its massive twisting roots erupted from the earth, creating a fortress of shade, a rare and precious commodity. It was a place of meetings and partings, of secrets whispered and judgments passed. Today, it held a single, silent occupant. A stranger sat slumped against the widest root, as if the tree itself had absorbed his last ounce of strength. His clothes, once of good quality, were layered with the pale, fine dust of long, dry roads. His head was bowed, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, but his posture spoke of a weariness that went beyond the physical. This was not a man resting, this was a man pushed to the very limit of his endurance, a vessel emptied. Amara's first instinct, honed by lean times, was to pass by quietly, to make no sound, to offer no greeting, to become a shadow on the path. In times of scarcity, every glance could become a plea, every acknowledgement a debt. The handful of garri in her pouch seemed to burn against her skin, a selfish, protective fire. She tightened her grip on the calabash and took a softer step. But then, as if sensing her presence, he stirred. His head lifted slowly, and he pushed back the brim of his hat. His eyes met hers. They were not the eyes of a beggar. They held no demand, no cunning calculation, no performative misery. Instead, they held a quiet, profound resignation, the look of a man who had asked nothing of the world for so long that he expected nothing in return. The dust on his cheeks was traced with faint lines, the ghosts of sweat long dried. In that deep, weary gaze, Amara did not see a stranger. She saw the reflection of her own silent struggles, the weight of carrying on when the path ahead seemed to lead only to more dust. It was that silent surrender that halted her steps. Her heart, a battlefield of caution and compassion, warred violently with her stark reality. The voice of scarcity screamed its logic. What is one man against your mother? Your duty is within your walls. Keep walking. But an older, deeper voice, one her mother had sung into her as a child, whispered of hospitality, of ibia obia, the sacredness of the guest. To let a traveler perish at the crossroads under the iroko tree was an abomination, a curse upon the land and upon one's own spirit. Without a word, as if moving in a dream, Amara lowered the heavy calabash from her head. The cool clay base kissed the hot earth with a soft thud. The man watched her, his expression unchanged, yet a faint light of awareness, like the first star in a twilight sky, flickered in the depths of his exhaustion. She stood there for a breathless moment, the tyrant sun beating on her back, caught between the empty road behind her and the impossible choice before her. The calabash of water and the pouch of garri were no longer just sustenance. They were the weights on the scales of her destiny, and she felt her hand begin to tremble as she reached for them. The red dust puffed in soft clouds as Amara knelt, the coarse grains imprinting themselves on her bare knees. The act felt monumental, a silent rebellion against the drought that had gripped both the land and the human spirit. She could feel her mother's phantom gaze on her back, hear the ghost of the cough that awaited in the dark hut. Yet, she could not unsee the emptiness in the stranger's eyes. With deliberate care, she tilted the calabash. Water, clear and cool, whispered as it filled the small curved cup she had fashioned from a dry gourd. The sound was a tiny music in the parched silence. She offered it first. The stranger's hands, when they reached out, were maps of labor, scarred, calloused, with nails worn down to the quick. They trembled, not with weakness, but with the profound control of a man restraining a desperate thirst. He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers, a touch as light and dry as a butterfly's wing. He did not gulp. He drank slowly, savoring each sip, letting the liquid reclaim the desert of his throat. His eyes never left hers over the rim, and in them, the resignation began to thaw, replaced by a dawning, profound astonishment. Then came the harder sacrifice. Amara untied the small pouch from her wrapper. The faded thread felt like a lifeline about to be severed. She loosened the drawstring and the earthy, slightly sour scent of the garri rose to meet her, the smell of home, of scarcity, of survival. She hesitated for a heartbeat, the image of her mother's sunken cheeks flashing before her. Half, her heart bargained. I must take half. She poured a careful mound of the coarse, off-white flakes into her own palm, feeling their gritty weight. It was more than half, it was the lion's share, leaving only a dusty remnant for herself and Neka. She added a few drops of precious water from the calabash directly onto her palm, using the fingers of her other hand to mix it with a practiced, circular motion. The paste formed, simple and humble. There was no oil, no pepper, no sweetness. It was the bare essence of sustenance. She extended her offering, her palm becoming a living plate. Take this, she said, and her voice was barely a whisper, carried away on the hot breeze. It felt like speaking in a dream. The journey is long, and no one should face it with an empty spirit. The stranger's breath caught. He looked from her face to the paste in her hand, a tremor passing through his broad shoulders. This was not just food, it was a sacrament of shared poverty. With the same reverence one might show a sacred relic, he bowed his head slightly and took the paste from her palm. His touch was careful, avoiding taking the very last bit. He ate slowly, each mouthful a deliberate act of acknowledgement. As he did, a transformation occurred. The weariness did not vanish, but it was edged out by a radiant, unspoken gratitude that shone from his eyes with an almost physical warmth. It was as if he were seeing not just her, but the very core of her character, the unbroken lineage of kindness that had survived the famine. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, collecting the gift she had given. The air between them hummed with a new, unspoken understanding. Kindness in an empty land, he began, his voice a low, resonant rumble like thunder gathering on a far horizon, is the rarest of waters. It creates an oasis that no drought can touch. He studied her, his gaze now alert, penetrating, missing no detail, the mended edge of her wrapper, the quiet worry in her brow, the steadfast set of her shoulders. What is your name, daughter of this soil? Amara, she replied, the name feeling suddenly heavier, more significant than just a word she answered to. He repeated it, not as a question, but as a statement. Amara. He nodded once, a firm, decisive gesture, as if he were etching the name into the memory of the earth itself, sealing it away in a vault of future promises. The silence stretched, comfortable now, filled with the shared understanding of a sacred transaction that had nothing to do with trade. Strength seemed to return to him not from the food, but from the act itself. He rose to his feet, a tall, solid figure against the bleached sky. He adjusted his dusty cloak and gave her one final, lingering look. It was a look that held a universe of unsaid words, a promise, a blessing, a farewell. Without another sound, he turned and continued down the sun-bleached path, his silhouette gradually dissolving into the shimmering heat haze. Amara watched him until he vanished. She looked down at the empty pouch in her hand, its flatness a stark verdict. Yet, as she placed the light calabash back upon her head and turned toward home, a strange and defiant fullness blossomed within her chest. It was a warmth that outshone the sun, a quiet certainty that she had fed not just a man, but something far more important. Her spirit, against all reason, felt sated. A week later, a new sound pierced Umuofia's heavy silence. It began as a distant rumble, a vibration in the earth that was not thunder. Soon, it resolved into the creak of sturdy ox carts and the harmonious chatter of men. This was not the grim, familiar procession of tax collectors or the ominous quiet of soldiers. This was a caravan of abundance. Sturdy carts, their wheels caked with the dust of benevolent travel, were laden with bulging sacks of seed yam, millet, and maize. Behind them walked craftsmen, their shoulders bearing the good weight of digging tools, well liners, and baskets of saplings. At their head walked the stranger, transformed. Gone was the dust-choked cloak and the mantle of exhaustion. He stood tall, clad in the rich, indigo-dyed isi cloth of a titled man, a patterned cap sitting proudly on his head. A staff of intricate ironwork was in his hand, denoting not just authority, but mastery, the mastery of a man renowned across clans as Okeyo, the master farmer and builder whose touch coaxed plenty from stubborn soil and whose wisdom engineered springs in the deepest earth. His gaze swept over the gathering, curious villagers emerging from huts like seedlings after a first rain, until it found its anchor. He walked with purpose through the stunned crowd, which parted in silent awe, straight to the humble hut at the village's edge. There Amara stood frozen in her doorway, one hand supporting her mother, Neka, whose weak frame seemed fortified by sheer wonder. The man, Okeyo, stopped before them. The entire village held its breath. Amara, he announced, his voice now a clear, carrying baritone that resonated with purpose. Do you recognize the weary traveler who shared the shade of your great iroko tree? She could only nod, her throat tight. I have traveled many roads, he continued, his eyes holding hers, not just to map the land, but to chart the heart of its people. I was sent to find a community where the human spirit had not been parched by hardship, where the sacred law of obia, of hospitality, still lived not just on the tongue, but in the action. He turned slightly, addressing the wider audience now. This daughter of Umuofia, with an empty granary and a sick mother to feed, offer her last handful of garri and her last calabash of water to a stranger she believed was nothing. She asked for no reward, expected no return. That single act of selfless compassion was the test I never spoke of. In her, I saw the unbroken soul of this village. He turned back to Amara, his expression softening into a profound respect. Therefore, Umuofia has been chosen. We will sink new, deep wells where the water is sweet and cold. We will plant these fertile resistant seeds and teach you the methods to make them thrive. We will rebuild what the drought has broken. The village erupted. A wave of joyous disbelief broke into ululations, shouts of thanksgiving, and tears that cleansed dust from weathered cheeks. But amidst the celebration, Okeyo's attention returned to Amara. He stepped closer, and for her ears only, beneath the rising din, he added, "But a wise heart that guides a generous hand is the rarest seed of all. Such a spirit must not be left untended. My destiny is not just to bless a village, but to partner with a heart that already knows the true meaning of harvest." In his eyes, Amara saw no pity, but a profound partnership. He saw not just the poor village girl, but the woman who could steward abundance with the same integrity with which she had stewarded lack. And looking from his face to the carts of seed, to her mother's radiant smile, and finally to her own hands, the very hands that had mixed the garri, Amara, at last, saw the miraculous, boundless yield of a single, faith-filled handful.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Folksdale by T Vibes.